Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Happy Saturday.
You too.
Thanks.
I signed on with the wrong account at first, so
Love that for you.
it
So,
is signed on to the right account now.
yay.
I logged on and I logged off very quickly, so I don't know if you noticed.
I saw something and I was like, it'll get figured out. I'm not worried.
Is yeah, Stephanie's here too. Or
Tis
Emily.
me.
Okay.
Yes, at least you do.
Hello. How's it going?
Oh, it's going.
He sounds
Just got back
organized.
into town late last night, so I'm like, but fine.
Where were you?
We went to California to see my grandparents and
Fun.
a
Yeah,
little road trip. So,
yeah. I
hmm,
hope everything went well.
yeah, it was a really good trip.
Good.
Yeah, no complaints.
All right. I'm just clearing off this flute from my bench real quick. How are your flutes coming?
I feel pretty good. Um, I am still struggling with removing one pin from my flute, and so I was wondering if you had any extra tips. But as a side note, I did have like a quote unquote emergency flute repair this last week that did require unpinning. And I did very well, if I do say so myself.
Yay!
The rod was bent, and so the keys, even though it was also rusty, they just kept getting stuck, even though I was getting them unrusted. And so I was like, okay, new tactic. I don't think it's rusted anymore. I think it's bent. Oh no, I have to unpin this. And I feel really good. And it looks really nice. And the student hasn't said anything otherwise. So something's
Yay!
happening. Thank you. Thank you. Unpinning was my fear.
It's an overwhelming one, that's for sure.
So that's me.
Mine's going well as well. I just repinned everything this morning. Didn't have any issues, so
Did you ever get that one key unpinned, or are we just skipping that for now?
no, I haven't yet. But I did make a JL Smith order this morning to get the extra springs and stuff to get down there. So
Okay,
it will happen eventually.
cool.
I also need to get springs. I did get those nippers you and I talked about last week, Christina, from Harbor Freight.
Okay.
But I just don't have any extra funds to put in like an online order with shipping at the moment because our house still hasn't sold.
Mm, that's rough. That's funds are pinched in a spot.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately, to be completely frank, I'm in $12,000 worth of debt right now,
Ouch.
um, from like all the bills and then from moving from like the sudden breakup and having to get a new place. So I'm kind of just hanging in there and just buying what's absolutely necessary. But I do know we have a video assignment with our springs, so um, if mine could be later rather than never, I'd
Yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah, that's fine. It's just
Thank
by
you.
the end of the course.
Okay.
So you're good.
Okay, thanks.
And I'm in probably about that more debt than that between my personal and my business together. So
Yeah.
I'm in the boat with you.
Okay. Buddies. Definitely not comfortable or expected. So,
Yeah,
just,
it's not. Yeah. And it sucks too because it just means that everything that comes in immediately goes straight to that just
yeah.
to keep your head above water.
Yeah. It'll come out soon. Just, golly, gotta get this house sold because that's all my equity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
that's
yeah.
no worries.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
I have a clean sort of bench at the moment. All right. So, how is padding going? Because the topics for today are about adjustments, but if we have questions on padding, I don't want to get too far ahead.
I am a little behind, but I feel better about my padding compared to the end of level 1. So I think I can get caught up this week.
Okay.
Same, actually. Same.
Okay. And you guys are comfortable with making the open hole pads and grommets and all that? Cool. Works for me. I just looked at the list of things to talk about today and I was like, we're really on adjustments already? I don't feel like we've been in the class that long.
I agree. I feel like that everything's going by so fast, but not in a bad way.
Yeah. This person's case is busted.
Oh no.
I'm gonna have to fix that zipper or attempt to. I remember. I just picked up a flute that I knew was an in one piece. So I haven't even looked at this since I did the quote on Zoom. So all of her notes are on it.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. Oh, this is perfect. So we've done adjustments with your adjustment screws when you've got everything there to make it really easy. But adjustments and getting rid of lost motion is a little bit more difficult with every like iteration of the flute. So, your student models have basically all adjustment screws. You can even have down to where the backside of your 1 and 1B flat will have an adjustment screw on, low end Bundies. 40-year-old Bundies. But when you get to intermediate flutes, you'll still have adjustment screws on your main keys. So like your A's and your F, E, and D will still have adjustment screws, but everything else is fitted with either sanding corks down or bending keys if they gotten out of whack, or adding little shims. And then when you get up to this level, which this is like a Brandon Cooper, but it'll be on like a Haynes as well, or a PAL. You don't have any adjustment screws at all, and everything is down to adding shims, not just under the pads, but now also on adjustments. So I'm gonna switch this camera here. Oh gosh. Focus. There we go. I'm just gonna let you see what this looks like. So this flute, instead of having an adjustment screw, still has like the plate that you would think there's an adjustment screw there, but there's not. So the adjustments themselves are still done the exact same way. Everything's pinned the exact same way. It's just that we now, instead of turning a little screw to get that adjustment, we have to use little paper shims and put them in the right place for that adjustment. So for this key here, it would be this little arm here. And then for this key, you're actually going to put it directly under this arm on the back side of that key, because that's where that hits. And then here, if I flip this over, instead of three or two keys touching back here, now you have a third key, and that's for this foot here. This key now has a foot.
And that's the middle one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's the one we'd put the paper shim on?
Yeah, that's for this, your F.
For the F. Okay.
Yeah. And you still have the one for the B flat. That first one. Pull this around. And then your normal B flat here. And then when we go up here to your A, you've got a little arm underneath that A key right there. And that's where that adjustment is for your A. See that?
Yeah. Do you like these adjustments more than having to shim a pad?
It's easier than shimming a pad because you're not
Okay.
taking the pad out or anything like that. You're just,
Yeah.
this is, again, you have to, if your pads aren't level, these are, again, another thing you can't do until your pads are level. So if you're having issues with a pad sealing on its own, then the adjustment's not going to do anything for you. You gotta have to fix the pad seal first and then get to the adjustments. But shimming this is a little bit easier than your pads. So you should have in your kit a stack of shimming papers from J.L. Smith. They don't come in this little fancy thing, but I made this thing because I got annoyed one day. If you wanted to make something similar, all I did was take envelopes and staple them together and then make pockets by gluing two sides of the envelope together.
That's so creative.
um it's very simple. It took me like a half hour to make this. But it just made myself a little book essentially, and I marked on each page what size paper is in that pocket. And I went with the measurements that are on J.L. Smith's site for most of these, but you can add thicknesses if you have paper around your house that's a little bit different than what's in that pack. You can, add some. I think all of these are sizes for J.L. Smith, but if you had something that wasn't exactly the same and you had some way to measure it or just mark it something else. Anyway, each of these I take a strip. Let's just say we're going to pretend that these two aren't closing together, which they're actually not. I can feel a slight difference in there. Where's my leak light? Under my bench. Not that big of a difference, though. It's enough. See that little leak there? So that's actually a pretty thin leak, so I'm going to actually go down. This is why tweezers are important, because I can't pick anything up off this silicone. There they are. They like to hide. Okay. I don't think that's the right pocket.
And what did you call these little spots that we're going to be putting the shims?
I call them adjustment arms. I don't know if that's what everybody calls them.
I will put it in quotes.
Does this have oil on it? Might have oil on it. So the downside to this is that if you do get oil on your paper, no glue is ever going to stick to that paper. Just noted. And it happens very easily when you are putting these right next to the slot in the key where the oil is going to seep out. So that's how a lot of the papers fall off. My theory anyway, is that the water has or oil has seeped out of the key at some point and gotten that tab wet, and then it falls out, and then the flute player is like, why isn't my flute playing? And I'm like, well, your shim fell off. But so what I do is I cut myself a little strip of whatever size I think I need to make that key work properly. And I'm just going to slide it in. I'm not gluing it. There's no glue on this. I'm just trying to make it do what I want it to. Ah, there we go. Slide it in like that. So I know it's under the key, and I know it's flat under the key because a lot of the times they'll bend on you if your key's not being held open properly, or the old papers are in the way. So making sure that it's flat in there, and then just do a test and see if it's the right size. And you can see obviously very quickly that this is not the right size because this key now has the leak and this key now has none. So that's too thick. So I'm going to pull that out and get a different one. So we're going to go with this guy. This is the thinnest paper I have. And this paper is actually the thin one, the 0.015 or 0.02002. 002 is actually not supposed to be in this one, but the 015 is almost the same as your cigarette pad paper. Like the what's that brand? Zorro? Zonda?
Ziegler?
Zonda.
Zonda. Some Z word.
Yeah. There is one downside to this Zonda paper, and that's your glue tends to just seep all the way through it from one side to the other. It's not like a solid paper, it's like a tissue paper. So sometimes it's hard to get the glue to behave, but do this with a razor blade, or you just need to get a strip. Same thing. Put that test piece in there. And even that's a little bit much, too thick. And that's the thinnest paper I have. So when that happens, it comes down a little bit to placement. So I'm going to try to scoot it forward. Not that far because it's going to hit the tone hole. Okay. So now it's going to be hard to show this, but I can pull this key off here in a second and show you the underside of this. But on this flute, they have like right here in the center, there's a circle piece of metal on the bottom side of this key, and that's where they like want the shims to be glued. So I've pulled this paper forward to just be on under the front edge of that circle, and it was still too thick. But sometimes that works. Sometimes just the like how far back versus how far forward you are can change things around. Goodness gracious. Well, this key's going to have some other issues going on that I can't fix right now because we actually have a leak in the back of this key here. And small leak in the back side of this key right here. So I'm not going to get it perfect today, but I'll just kind of walk you through how I glue these in. If I find one that is the right size and thickness, then what I do, these scissors are dead, is make myself a little hanging chad on the paper and use that little tab there to hold the glue. And then with this side, the glued side facing up or facing whichever direction I want this to be on. So for this piece, I'd want it up. This piece, I might want it down. I might want it up. It just kind of depends. Here I'd want it up, so it's on that small circular piece. I'll pull this key off here in a second. Anyway, whichever way you want the glue facing, then you slide it in back in between the key and pinch the key together, whether that means holding down the key so that these two pieces are tight together, or if it means, holding the foot of the key, just something so that those two keys are not pinched together. Then you can pull this off and you're left with the tab underneath the key itself. And that helps you not lose the tab that you're trying to glue, and you're not messing with that little tab. The other option is to use little tweezers and try to get just that little paper in, and that's kind of a pain. So this works better. It's off my finger finally. So that's the method with, I've got paper everywhere. Use these adjustments that don't have adjustment screws. My goodness, my book is falling apart. Or something. I think this is actually supposed to be in that pocket. I don't know. The measure. This is where the bad side of this comes in. They just go flying out, and I have to remeasure every single paper and put it back in the right container. But that's adjustments, and your key height adjustments and everything's always the same. So, not key height, but your adjustments for what keys close which keys and whatnot. So, it's just down to, does the flute have adjustment screws or does it not have adjustment screws, and how are you going to handle that? You can try different glues. Like today, one flute I had did have adjustment screws, but it was a PAL, and it came in because it was buzzing. So when that happens, the first thing I always check for is, are the screws on the pads actually tightened down? I also check to see that the adjustment screws aren't rattling. And I'll check that the pivot screws are tight and they're not rattling. Another thing that can rattle are the springs. So one of my theories was because this key here, the F key, didn't have the little leather support underneath the adjustment screw, that maybe the metal adjustment screw was rattling against the actual key below it. Because it was just on the F, and it started on F, and it would be lower than that, but it wouldn't be higher than that. So that was my theory, was maybe there was a bit of a rattle between those two keys. So I did, on that flute, glue in a little piece of leather, because the rest of the flute also had leather before. It's just I had removed the leather when I did the COA on that key alone. So I replaced it, and that time I glued that leather in with some E6000, because it's going to hold a lot better than the Zig pen here. So you can manipulate what type of glues you're using based on what you're trying to glue in place. Now, if you do have to glue in leather, you're going to have to look at how thick that piece of leather is. And that will affect your placement of the leather or of any thicker shim you put in, the thicker it is, the further you put it back in the key, the more gap you're going to have between that key and the one that it's supposed to be paired with. So you might find yourself like this leather here is the leather I used today, and you can see it's quite thick. It's like 1/32 inch thick. So when I glued that down, I actually, after the glue had dried, I put a taper in the back side of that piece that I cut in, and then I even skimmed off the top to make sure that it was the right thickness so that these keys would still close. Now I ended up cutting that because with this leather, sanding would not have worked. If you were to do that with paper, depending on the glue you use and how far cured the glue is, if you've gone too thick, if it's cured completely, you can use tiny scraps of sandpaper to sand down your cork or your even your shims. You just have to be really careful not to scratch the pads when you use these tiny little things of sandpaper, or scratch anything you don't want to scratch. But when I use something like this, you just have to be really cautious and also know exactly what you're trying to sand and which way it's glued to the key. Is it glued to the top of the key? Is it glued to the bottom of the key? And make sure that the sandpaper is sanding down that portion that is not metal. You don't really want to add a bunch of scratch marks into your metal. Questions so far?
Everything checks out.
So one kind of glue that some professional flute brands will use is actually super glue. And they use a thick gel super glue, and they'll glue down like one shim on the key, and they let it harden. I think they let it harden honestly before they even put the flute back together. And then once it's all back together, then they just take that super glue and they sand the super glue and the shim down to the thickness that they need for their adjustments. And it's a more solid adjustment that will hopefully last longer without having any flex in it or issues over a long period of time. Where super glue tends to fail is because it's very brittle. It will just crack off eventually, and it'll just kind of come off in one big piece, maybe two. So when that happens, then when it's on these adjustment arms like this, it'll immediately make the flute no longer play, and those players will notice like immediately that there's an issue. You're like, I was able to play F, and now I'm no longer able to play F or anything below it. So they tend to be very dramatic. um so you can choose at that point to, try to do the same method of installing, or you can, my personal preference is to, with these adjustments, is to use what I have and use what I know and use what I do every day. Because in the short term, I'm going to make the client happier faster. In the long run, I'll know how to fix it in the future. Either way, it's not like either option was a permanent solution. It's just a matter of what I have and what's on hand. So, all right. So that's probably my next level adjustments lesson. So if you get a flute and you want to try some of that out, feel free. it's not something I expect to be on the flutes that you have, but it's something that you should know about for flutes in the future. So other than that, we could talk about E, um, split E mechanism, maybe adjustments, but that's I don't have a split E flute in front of me. It's always just this arm that comes across here and touches a little tab there, and it closes this. Excuse me, drinking a Dr. Pepper. It closes this G without closing this one, right? That's your splitting mechanism. And it should close this key all the way. So if it's not closing this key all the way, then I'll use like a little shim underneath that arm to kind of get this to close all the way. Or if there are too many shims under there, you can have too many. If you're getting like 3 or 4 or 5 shims underneath there, it might be time to rip all those out and start with something a little bit thicker and then add a second. You really don't want more than like 2 or 3 shims stacked on top of each other because eventually they'll start falling off. So the fewer shims, the better in general. And that's the same rule of thumb for padding and for shimming adjustments. It's the fewer the better. So with the split E mechanism, typically start with cork. So if I'm going to start fresh, I'm just going to rip that cork off and start with a new cork, and I'm going to sand that cork to the thickness that I need and hopefully have no shims whatsoever. Now this is a Brandon Cooper, so this I don't know if these measurements I have are correct, but let's talk a little bit about key heights, finalizing your key heights. So, did we talk about key heights in your level ones?
I don't think so.
Okay, Stephanie, we may not have gotten to it in your class. um, so this is a fancy little key height gauge that JL Smith sells. Did I say that right? JL Smith. It felt weird in my mouth. What did I just say? This is each side will kind of measure a different flute. I don't know the specifics that they chose these measurements for. I just know that if you're matching to this side, you only use this side. If you're matching to this side, you only use this side. Each one of these notches here. Oops, let's focus on this. Thank you. So on this, let's just pick this side with the notch on the edge here. Each one of these circles or pieces of this tubing represents a different thickness. And the first one, the smallest one, is going to be the thickness for your trochees. And oh no, that's worse. Get that off screen. Let's do the C key here. So your trochees and your C key. And what you do is you line that up and you make it touch the tone hole, and it should be just barely touching the pad. That side doesn't work, so we're gonna flip this around and see that size fits. So I'm gonna stick with this side for the rest of the flute. We'll check the trochees. It's actually a little, so this one's correct. This one's not opening quite far enough. So that's where I would, that's this key here. So it's this outer trill key here. So that's where I would sand this trill key a little bit until I got this to fit so that they were opening to the same key height. The second notch on here. So that middle one there, that's going to be for the main line. That's going to be your basically this entire line here. All of these keys here. So you can take that one and go down the flute, which so I don't think I have the correct sizing for Brandon Cooper because neither ones of these fit. So I would have, this is where when you're getting to the high end stuff, every brand has their own key height measurements that they're supposed to be. And some of them will tell you, and some of them you have to beg and beg to find out what they're supposed to be, or you find a technician who has already done the begging and you ask them what the measurements are supposed to be. So this one's not quite fitting this flute here, but this is pretty standard for all student models and intermediates. You can use this as just a general gauge for like a basic Yamaha or Artley, Armstrong, Meinhardt, Jupiter, or whatever. You just pick one side and stick to it and you make it all match. So if they're not opening far enough, you sand the foot that's connected to that down so that they open a little bit further. If they're opening too far, you either change that cork or felt out so it's thicker, because maybe that one that's on there has worn down so far that there's nothing left. Or you can go back to using little paper shims and gluing that to the underside of the key to open or to close that key up by adding material to the backside of the key. It closes the front of the key, right? The main thing when you're checking your key height is when you get done checking the key height, now you have to go back and check for lost motion. So just so I don't forget to finish this, the first one is your trail keys and your C key. The second one is your main line. And the third one is your foot joint. I will say there are some brands that do a fourth one, and the fourth one is actually going to be your thumb key and your G sharp. So those will sometimes be separate key heights, but for the most part, using this in the middle one for your thumb key and your G sharp is fine. Okay. All right. So questions on that before I delve into lost motion?
Makes sense.
Okay. So lost motion, I'm just wondering how much of the lost motion did we discuss with level 1? Stephanie, I think your class might not have gotten quite as far.
I just have memory of me asking some questions. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we went through specific topics.
Okay. So, lost motion, there's the general rule with it is the object that has no lost motion is the one that causes the lost motion. And that's the part that confuses everybody. The one that has no lost motion, you would think is perfectly fine, but it's not. It's the one that's usually causing the lost motion. So let's just check this flute out. I don't know if there's actually going to be any on this one. It's actually in pretty decent shape. Yeah, there's nothing.
How dare it? How dare Brandon work perfectly?
Well, it's not perfect. I will tell you that. This pad is...
Okay.
That one's torn. Itself. That's why it's here, is that torn pad. And I think this one's torn as well. That one, it's got a little funky tear in it. Yeah. So it's not perfect.
Okay.
But it is a nice Brandon Cooper, I will say. Was not expecting to grab a Brandon Cooper. It's just what I grabbed. I have one other one that we might be able to try. That's not anywhere near as nice as a Brandon. Probably, if I remember right. I don't even think this is a brand name. I think this is a Amazon. Oh no, it's an art leaf. Okay. Okay, we've got a little lost motion in this one. That's quite a picture. An Artley next to a Brandon. Okay. So as I walk down this flute, these keys up here don't have any lost motion. And we're fine until right here. This little bit of motion, that's lost motion. So in other words, I'm pressing longer on this key before this one gets, or not that one gets engaged and starts to move with it. So this one has lost motion. This one has no lost motion. And you see we have lost motion here too. If I can hold the flute still enough for you to be able to see it. So the way lost motion works is that it's going to work between the keys that work together. So I kind of group on the flute everything together by how the flute comes apart. So these 4 keys are the first thing I go over because they're the first group of keys that goes on that potentially has lost motion. And then I worry about this group of keys here. And then very last thing is I worry about the thumb key. So starting down here, we know that this one has no lost motion, but these both have lost motion. Let's see, the easiest way to explain this is that the reason for the lost motion is because the key height between these may not be perfect, or if it is perfect, let's just see. That's there. That's a little bit more open, and that's even more open. Like I can actually get that to fall in there quite a bit. Whereas down here, you're focusing on the wrong thing, camera. It's just barely going in there at all. Computer mouse is in the way. So we know that this one's not opening quite as far as these two. Since this one's only opening so far, this key here can only open as far as the one that's closed the furthest. Does that make sense? This one can't go up any further than this one will allow it because this one's closed, more closed than the rest. So we can either adjust the key heights here. Let's say this one's way too open. I could adjust the key height on this one to close it down a little bit more, which means that I would get rid of some, if not all, of that lost motion right there. Or if I open this key up to match the key height that's down here, or to match the one next in the middle, then maybe I'll get it to where these two don't have any lost motion and this is the only one. Okay. So I think if it was me, if this was a flute that I was, about to finish, I'd say this key here has the closest key opening that I like. So I'd kind of want to match this key opening to these 2 keys. So that means opening this one a little bit more and closing this one a little bit off. So it's actually doing both.
Can you go through that thought process one more time? You liked the height of the E key, so you'll make the F and D key match?
Yeah, because when I'm using this little gauge here, the F does fit. get the shiny objects out of the background. Maybe the computer will focus on what I want it to
Must
focus
find
on.
shiny. Yeah.
So this opening here is it's good. It's just it's sitting kind of more on the front of the tone hole than I am actually going into the key. Whereas this one here, I'm actually sitting on top of the tone hole and touching the top of the pad a little bit more. And then this one here is way too far. Like I'm the foot joint over here. So I don't want foot joint height on this key. So I need to bring this one down. That much I know. This opening feels a little bit better if I'm going to match all these to a standard. Right? So that means I need to open this key up a little bit more, and I definitely need to close that key a little bit. So I'm going to start with opening the one key because that's going to be easier to do. I say that, and then I look around and I have no sandpaper. Sandpaper. Where are you? Nope. It's walked off. I have that tiny little piece, but that's not near big enough. This might work, maybe. Not quite the paper I generally use, but I'll give it a shot. So I think this is like a 400 or 600 grit. I don't think it's 1200.
It looks
definitely
too chunky.
A 2. Yeah. Definitely a 20 on the back of this thing.
20.
Maybe it's 320. That's a common number. Anyway, so I would just use this. The back of this has felt on it, so I'm not really sure how much I'm gonna be able to sand on the back of this thing. Sometimes felt sands.
And that's the part that touches the body, right?
Okay, I think we're gonna bend that key because that felt didn't move. So I'm just gonna pull this key back a little bit to open it up a tiny bit more. And this is where I usually do it too much. Oh yeah, we're at foot joint.
Oh no.
Yeah. Okay, that's better. So now I don't have any lost motion now with this key here.
Yay.
It's all gone. There's nothing here. So it's just down to this one here. So since this one's opening too far, just like I did with that one when I overdid it, I'm closing the key off and I'm bending the foot forward. Hopefully just a tad. Now, if this was the Brandon Cooper, I wouldn't be bending. I'd be adding shims.
Got it.
This is an Artley, though. I will bend an Artley key foot all day long. But see, now our lost motion has come back. So I have no lost motion here now, but I have lost motion here. And I still have none here. And I'm not really surprised that I have none here.
So you opened up the F a little bit, but now the E has the lost motion?
Yes,
Okay.
but not because I opened the F. It's because I closed the D.
Oh, so the D is closed too much?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, I'm gonna type that.
Sometimes it's worth it to, oh gosh, that is quite a gap there.
Jeez.
Um, with it being that this is felt, even when it's cork, sometimes it's worth to get rid of the lost motion on one day and then leave it overnight for the cork or the felt to like re-expand, because sometimes grabbing with pliers or whatnot can compress that cork or felt enough that your measurements are no longer perfect. So do it one day and then come back the next day and check your measurements again and just make sure that you still have no lost motion. Hopefully, it's
Okay.
stabilized, but sometimes that it'll unstabilize or destabilize overnight.
That makes sense. Can when you're working on that D key, it's off camera, and I'm like, I kind of want to see your hands. Is that too much to ask? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just want to see like how like you're holding it whenever you're trying to
I'm
close
pinching
it.
this closed here,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm using the back end of my pliers to either
To
push it
smash that. Okay.
closed, or I'm using the front end of the pliers to pull it open. Goodness. Can you hear the oboe playing in the background?
Uh-uh.
Okay, good. Okay. So I like the key height where everything's at right now. But there's still some lost motion happening right here on the F or F sharp. Um, it's kind of weird that I've got the key height working and now we have lost motion. Oh, you know what? Check this out. Because I just pulled this off my shelf and I haven't done any work to it at all. See that gap? Not sealing at all. That's closed all the way. So that right there, your adjustments have to be done prior to doing lost motion, because now that I've moved that adjustment screw, I don't have any lost motion. So you can kind of see how the lost motion, everything affects it. So getting your flute as far as you possibly can before even thinking about lost motion is important. Because the less you're having to look for, less issues you're having to look for while you're fixing lost motion, the better. So making sure your pads are level, making sure your adjustments are good. And then make sure you don't have any bent keys, you don't have anything crazy going on. Lost motion is the very last thing you take into account, other than maybe your play test. But you can do your play test before or after or both. Because by all technicalities, your flute should be playable when you go to find lost motion. Questions?
I feel good.
I'm running out of topics, so questions would be good. It's only 2:30.
Do you want on topic or off topic questions?
I don't care.
Okay, off topic question. Long time ago, you told us that you thin out your contact cement glue.
Uh-huh.
What did you use to thin it out with?
Contact cement thinner.
Oh, that's a legit product.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Was not expecting that. Okay, cool.
Yeah, a lot of people think it's lacquer thinner. It is not lacquer thinner. Do not go to the hardware store and buy lacquer thinner. That stuff does not work with contact cement.
Cool beans. Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Mine's getting a little gloopy. I guess it's old. Question mark?
Probably, yeah. The can will dry out over time.
I did buy a new can, but I can't freaking open it.
Oh no.
I use pliers on it. I just can't get it open. I'm so mad.
No.
Nothing.
Okay.
Okay. I have more questions unless Emily has one.
Go for it.
Okay. My oh my god. Sorry, I almost lost a tiny part that I forgot to put back in my thing.
No.
My pin that's just stuck. It is like halfway out. I cannot get it to budge. I can't whack it out anymore. I can't pull it with the nippers. I can't pull it with pliers. I don't know what to do.
Okay. Can you I was gonna say, can you show it to us? But I'm thinking pictures might be better so we can get a really good image of it.
Okay. I can email those to you like right now if you want.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
While you're doing that, I'm pulling up that contact cement thinner for you.
Thank you. I have like Music Medic, JL Smith, and Fareeze like all pulled up in tabs right now, searching for things. Oh, it's over here because I was working on it. Silly. Okay. Hopefully, the quality is decent.
Okay. I'm going to So this is the high grade stuff that we get that's not from the hardware store. Allied sells the same stuff, they just put a different label on it with a different part number. Which I don't know why they changed the part number, but yeah, the solvent is what you need. You can continue using the hardware store stuff and just buy the solvent, and you just add a little bit of the solvent to your can and shake it up. Just don't do more than like a third of this solvent to 2/3 of glue. You can get it if you go past like 50-50 in the future, you're gonna have more solvent than glue. And it gets
sense.
Nothing sticks anymore. So eventually, like, basically what I do is one time I'll do solvent, and if it's getting goopy and thick, I'll continue to do solvent because it just means that the old solvent has evaporated again. But if it's so thin and nothing is sticking, like it's drying faster than, and you're not left with a lot of glue behind when it dries, then you definitely need to top up with glue. Or if your can is too low, like when I get my can down to like here, oh, wrong camera. If I get my glue is, down to the near the bottom of the can, I'm gonna fill with glue first and then a little bit of solvent.
That makes sense.
So
awesome. Thanks.
And they also sell, if you need the replacement cans. They also have the can replacements here too.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Emily, do you want these photos too?
Sure. Sounds good.
What's your email?
That'll be Emily at
Emily at
RIELL family.com.
family.com. Okay. And this is a pin, flute pin pics. Stuck, frowny face. Attach file. How do I do it? I think I took four photos just to get like as many angles as possible. It just looks super normal, but she's very stuck, and I really thought, I feel very confident about, like, I guess I need to give a little more backstory. Let me send this. Okay. So I had unpinned this, and when I went to pin it back, it wasn't going all the way through, and I feel fairly confident that it was the right angle and it was the right side of the pin.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm second guessing my confidence in that, of course, but like I cannot get it back out to try to reset the pin.
You hit send, right?
I did.
Okay.
It's coming from my cell phone.
Okay.
Just gotta hit that satellite. I think, okay, there it goes. Yeah.
Okay. So that's the pin, right?
Yes.
And you're trying to pull it out,
Yes.
and you can't grab on that and just pull it out?
I cannot. I'm scared if I use more force, I'm going to break it or severely damage my rod. Like it's going to bend. I know it could bend it back. I'd rather not. But is that a risk I need to take?
When you're grabbing this key to hold it, how are you grabbing it?
Well, if I'm using a lot of force, I'm trying to get my fingers evenly distributed across the rod. So when I pull, it's going both ways, but it still feels like it's bending under my hands.
So, what I want you to try to do is pull this key off. Okay. I want you to just like try to hold just that key itself.
Okay.
And then pull that pin with your pliers.
Okay. Not the nippers?
No, I mean your nippers.
Okay.
But have you filed down the nippers?
Yes. Part of me makes me scared not enough, though. Like, they're not sharp. I can run my hand over it, and I'm not getting cut or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like that they're like little teeth. Okay. I mean, if this breaks, or if if I like yank it out and I lose the pin, I can just buy more pins. But I would have to wait a little bit.
I'll send you a pin.
I'd appreciate that. Okay, y'all, I'm so scared. Okay, I'm gripping it with the towel because my hands are so sweaty. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Lordy B. I like cannot get this out. Come on. You know you wanna. My hands are so wet.
And there's nothing sticking out on the top of that or on the underside.
No. Mm-mm.
Can you see into the hole?
I can.
How far is it too far for your punches?
It is too far for my punches. I've given it some very serious whacks, and I'm worried if I whack it any harder, I'm going to start expanding that metal.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other option is that you could just mail me that key.
True.
I can definitely tell you're trying.
God, never in my life. Like, this is worse than a jar of salsa at 2 a.m. Like, not get this out. I feel like it shouldn't be this difficult.
With as much as you have sticking out of that key, I agree. It shouldn't be that difficult.
It makes me wonder what I did wrong.
I'm wondering if you bent the end of the pin at some point, or if you mushroomed it inside the key.
I will take that assumption. Yes. I'm worried about that too, because when I was trying to get it back in, I was like, I gave it a whack and it went in, and I gave it another whack and nothing happened.
Okay, let's try this. The first thing I want to do, because you've got some marks from those pliers, the nippers trying to pull it. Do you have a really fine file?
Let me check what grit I have. Oh, I also got those.
Or some sandpaper.
Those Swiss files.
That'll work.
I just put those. Needle files. Needle files?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what am I going to do? Just file around it?
Yeah, file around that pin. Let me share this again. So kind of file around the pin all the way around, just to get rid of any burrs that might be on the edge. And this is just so we don't create any accidental other problems going on. We're trying to avoid potential problems. So you don't need to do a ton of it, just enough that you can feel all the way around. There's nothing sticking out the side or anything like that.
Okay. Filing metal is like a whole new feeling.
Yes, it is. If you want to see some really crazy filing, you should check out ClickSpring on YouTube.
Okay.
He has an entire channel dedicated to hand tool and lathe tool making. He makes a ton of brass stuff. Have you ever heard of the Antikythera mechanism? So it's a clock that's not a clock. It's like a year-long automatic calendar. I don't know if it's automatic or if it's just a matter of. It's sort of automatic. It's just supposed to track everything from the day of the year, day, year, month, the sun position, and the moon position.
Cool.
And it's from 2,000 years ago.
Oh.
You got him?
Yeah. Oh, thank y'all for being on this journey with me. I will be signing autographs shortly.
I wasn't expecting you to get that. I was gonna have you hammer it back in.
Christina, I was thinking about doing that before this class, and I was like, no, because what if I F something up? I almost swore. Since our last meeting, I've worked on this every day. Oh my god. Woo!
Okay.
Got it.
So, since we didn't do this, what I was gonna have you do was, after you filed the around and made sure there's no burrs. I was going to have you hammer that pin back in all the way so that you could then file the bottom of the pin to get rid of any kind of mushrooming that might have been going on. And then knock it back out and pull it out. And hopefully, having gotten rid of any mushrooming or any damage to the end of the pin, you would have been able to pull that pin back out.
Genius.
So, whatever filing you did enough to get it moving. So I'm glad.
Yeah, thanks. I did feel like some catches when I was doing the filing, and I just did it like super gently.
Yeah, so you might have had some. It's weird to have burrs on the top that would prevent you from pulling.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't make sense, but maybe there was some burrs on the top of the key, and maybe you got those out as well. So
maybe so. I'm looking at this, and it does look a little bent, but it looks bent at the top that was sticking out, but maybe
that could have happened when you just pulled it. So yeah, I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know.
I would recommend that we put a new pin in. We get rid of that pin and we start over.
Let's do it. I'm gonna throw it away.
Okay. So then let's see. Let's go back to this ordering.
Okay. So, and I was looking up pins to buy.
So JL Smith sells only the full length pins, but if you go to Freeze, they have these pre-cut pins that you can get, and they have a larger taper than normal. So you're just kind of stuck with the length of this pin, but as far as having something to have in stock just in case issue, these are great for just like student models and intermediate models. I wouldn't necessarily put it in a Brandon or something really nice, but without needing to finish the top off or finish the bottom off, like we discussed last week. This is a quick little grab it, throw it in. What I will say to watch out for, you can even see it in this picture. Some of these have rust starting.
Oh god.
So it's a good idea to clean off any kind of rust you see on them when you get them, or at least before you use it. What the heck? Did they choose a flute that has the thumb key screw sticking out?
100% they did.
Yeah. So I kind of think these are the pins that similar to what they use in the factory, where they're pre-cut, they're one size fits all kind of thing. So they're really thin on one end and really fat on the other end, so they may not fit perfectly, but they'll fit close enough. If you ever get it to where it goes to all the way through, and it's flush on the top and it's sticking out really far on the bottom, just make sure that it's stable. You have that it's actually locked in place first off. If it's not locked in place and you've pushed it all the way through, then you're going to need a different solution because it's too small at that point. But if it's not too small and it's fitting fine, but the end sticks out a whole long ways, you need to make sure that it's not interfering with a pad, it's not interfering with a tone hole. Occasionally I've had pins stick out so far that they actually scratch the edge of a tone hole as the key's moving up and down. So, look out for that. Make sure that they're not poking into a pad or something crazy like that. You might have to cut the end, the thin side down, so it fits the flute. But that should be all you have to do with these. Other than that, just to kind of recap, we should have the other type of pin around here somewhere.
Golly, flute pin installation pliers, $60. Just that one tool.
Oh, I don't. I've tried pin pliers. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not. This is another version of that flute gauge. Same thing, but instead of a cut on a lathe where it's in a circle, this is a piece of metal with stair steps. So the first step is for the trill, the second step's for the body, third step's for the foot. Just because I scrolled past it. Explain what that is. Trying to find the other pins. Can you see the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was like, where's the border? Couldn't see the zoom border anymore. These are springs.
Oops.
What does Faris call these darn things? This is why I never know what to call anything, because one company calls it one thing and another company calls it another. This is not the brand that I use, but these are those brooches that I was showing Stephanie last week. I get a larger set off of the internet, but I don't know what the taper is. That's the downside. Yeah, well, can we, we're just supplies.
You know what the janitor said when he jumped out of the closet?
Boo.
Supplies. Emily got it. Only because you said supplies, Christina. Sorry.
I was like, I don't know, boo.
You're like deep in thought, and I'm over here like dad jokes. So sorry.
That's fine. Goodness gracious, I've completely forgotten what Freeze calls those things. Do you guys know what silver paper protector strips are?
I have some, I
Okay.
think.
I was just like, is that something we should talk about? It's not anything I've ever brought up, but I will say parents and players don't really know what they are or how they work. These are all screws. So if you lose an adjustment screw, sometimes they're in here.
Ooh.
Or pivot screws. This is definitely where I go for pivot screws. Unless I have to go to Allied.
I did
For
lose
old
students.
flutes. For old instruments. I'm not really sure what Faris calls it. This is kind of bugging me. Because I know they had full-length ones. But I don't... How is a camera a flute tool? Like, I mean, I use a ton of cameras, but I also teach online, so... Whatever. Yeah, not seeing it. Anyway, any other questions or topics that we want to cover? We've got about 8 minutes left.
Emily, do you have anything?
I'm sure as soon as I work on my flute some more, I'll have more questions, but I'm to the point where it makes sense. I just need to do it.
Fair enough. Any of these tools that you see that you want to know what they're for? I'm scrolling through them pretty fast, I know, but
Gosh, we've talked about so many of them that the other ones are just like ignore, ignore, ignore.
yeah, we talked about the nut drivers, right? In Flute 1.
I don't think we did.
I don't think we did either.
So, if you're working on really old student flutes, I believe Armstrong is notorious for these. Emerson maybe too. I don't remember if Artley ever did them. Anyway, instead of like a pad screw with a slot down the center, they use these hex nut pad screws. And they also used it on their flat spring screws. So that's why there's multiple sizes. I believe these two are the most common, the 3/32 and the 7/64. They're the most common sizes that are needed. I don't know why they put this one by itself, the 1/8. Ah, okay, so this is the 1/8 has been used on new models. Which ones do I have? I've got two. I've got the 1/8 and the 3/32. So I don't have the 7/64. So may not need the 7/64 as much as you think. But what I do with them is, well, how well you can see, but I fill the nut driver with beeswax, and then when I go to I let it cool off so the beeswax is hard. So the next time I go to use a nut screw, the screw will push into the beeswax, but it's not going to go any further into the tool than just the head of the screw will allow. Because the beeswax will stop it. Because that hole in the screwdriver is actually goes like a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch deep. So you don't want to lose your screw inside the driver. But yeah, that's my little trick with that. But and I've seen other technicians actually take each pad screw that they have to remove, and they remove it once and then they cut a slot into the top of the screw, which weakens the screw. And I don't like it when they do that, because when they cut that slot, they're adding fail points onto the head of the screw, and it could potentially break off in the key. And you don't want that. I've dealt with that once already this year, and once a year is enough. once every 5 years is enough, honestly.
Oh my gosh.
It sucks. Okay, well, you know what? I know J.L. Smith has pins.
Just not chill, baby. I think my rod is bent from trying to remove that pin because I cannot get it. I can't get the keys off the rod now.
Okay.
So you might have to pull all your keys off and straighten that rod, and then put the keys back on. Yeah, I know. I know.
I'll work on it. That's what happened with that student's flute earlier this week that I had successful unpinning and pinning on.
They've redone this picture so you can really see these pins, but they're about an inch long.
Dang, that's a good picture.
Yeah. Yeah, they're about an inch long, and you basically you drop it in your flute and you mark your top and bottom where you want to cut, and you cut it. And then what I do is I flat file the bottom, or the small end, so that when you go to punch it out, you've got something to punch against really easily. and then I try to make the top curved and remove all the jagged marks by filing it in a bench motor. Um, so I get a soft topped pin so it doesn't snag on anything. And you always when you cut them, I always caught when I push them into the key, I just do a soft push. I just push it as far as my hand will make it go so that um when I go to hammer it in, I know it's going to go in further. So since I know it's going to go in further, I always have to leave extra on the top side, and then I cut the bottom, the thin end flush to the bottom of the key because when it goes in further, it'll stick out a little bit. So I think I showed making one last week, so you can always go back to last week's video and watch that. But yeah, those are the pins, and you can see JL Smith has large and small pinning reamers separated out. And if you can't get a hold, like physically get a hold of the pins, you can always put them inside your pin vise and then use the pin vise to rotate them in the key if you need to. But these are to clean up the hole if, let's say, it's got damaged a little bit. You just make sure that you're, doing the same thing that you do with the pin, where you go in the same direction, so that the wide end is always on the outside and the small end is always on the inside, so you're not changing that taper. And hopefully these pinning needles have the same taper as these pinning reamers. Because if they don't have the same, you may not get a great fit. But if you can get close, I do find there's some room for like just kind of getting the pin to tap in a little bit further to clean it up. All right.
All right.
I think we've covered enough for today.
Yeah, I got my keys off.
Yay!
Oh gosh, success! I'm so happy.
Yay.
Okay, so as we were going through this class, I was, kind of adding things to my like Free and JL Smith carts to just like, plan how much. And these things I need aren't super expensive, so I'm gonna see if I think Christina, you and I talked about this, how my boss is covering like half of this class for me. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna see if she can cover these tools so that way I can get caught up to where Emily is too.
Okay. So I know I haven't been that great about reminding you what assignments are and talking about assignments. I do have the list of video assignments on our syllabus. So we had that initial assessment video for that first week. The unpinning video, I'll count your one-on-ones for that because we focused on that for the one-on-one. There's a spring replacement video. There's a padding video. There's a grommet pad seating video. So that's specifically installing a grommet pad. So kind of separate that out from just regular padding. And then as up to today, the last assignment is adjustments and lost motion video. So there's a few more after today, but they're mostly to do with the piccolo. So basically at this point, next week looks like we're going to be doing a lot of demo work. So me demoing some topics that we're not really covering. I'm just trying to kind of give you some ideas of what goes into a mechanical overhaul. and so you can kind of get an idea of if this is something you want to, take on for like a level 3 one-on-one type of class. And then the week after that is supposed to be your presentations for these flutes. So having your flute done, having the first initial setup of it done, and do your presentation on that, and then submitting your flutes for a assessment. So that assessment is just kind of like an initial okay, we've got the flute put together, we think we got it working, but it may not be 100%. So we're just trying to get an assessment of how you're doing so far on it. Ideally it's somewhat playable at this point with a new set of pads and whatnot. But I'm gonna be shipping it back to you with comments for you to fix, and then you're gonna ship it back to me with your piccolo at the end of the piccolo session, and for like a final go over, so that that'll give you like another like 6 weeks or whatever, more than 6 weeks because we got holidays in there, to kind of go back over that flute and fine tune everything. So does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds
well
good.
So you'll need your piccolo. That means you're gonna need your piccolo in about 4 weeks. 4 weeks, because we'll do that one-on-one the week after.
Perfect.
Okay. Cool.
Yes. Awesome. Thanks,
All right.
Christina.
Thank you. I'll see you next week.
See y'all. Bye.
Bye.